This week on Diabetes Connections, a look into the full-time RV life with Type 1. I'm talking to Chris and Amanda Stocker. Chris lives with T1D, as does one of their two children, and they've been living in an RV and traveling the country since 2021. If you've ever thought about doing that with diabetes, we're answering all the questions. What does it look like day to day? How do they visit the doctor? Where do you store everything? And why do they love it? This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of the show. Always so glad to have you here. I'm your host, Stacey Sims, and we aim to educate and inspire about diabetes with a focus on people who use insulin. A big hello to my new friends from New Jersey and Rockland County, and some of my old friends, people that I've known for a very long time that I was really lucky to see at the Breakthrough T1D Summit there this past weekend. I did a new presentation, shared a bunch of stuff on social media, and I'm just putting it out there. These events are always so much fun. If you would like me to come speak to your organization, just let me know. You can always contact me through the website or stacy@diabetes-connections.com. Next up is some local stuff with the North Carolina Breakthrough T1D chapter. And then summer's going to be here before we know it. Busy summer always with conferences. And our next Mom's Night Out events are this fall in Minneapolis. Registration is open. And Phoenix. I will not be traveling to any of those conferences via RV, although I may surprise some of you. I have done 2 big RV trips with my family. The first one was in 2016, and Slade, my husband, proposed it. Our kids were in 2 different schools. They had 2 different spring breaks, and we were trying to figure out what to do. And he said, let's go to Chicago and watch Syracuse play in the NCAA tournament. I went to Syracuse University. He did not, but he's a much bigger fan than I am, although I'm a pretty big fan. And we thought, okay, that's going to be a great idea. And then he proposed RVing our way there. Quick side note, as a family, I think I've shared this before, we are trying to get to all 50 states, all 4 of us together. So we have to be together. We have to take a picture together, feet on the floor so airports don't count. And he said, look, if we go to Chicago, we live in North Carolina, we can do, I think it was 6 states in 5 days if we drive. And he proposed renting an RV for the trip. And I said, that's fine, honey, but that is going to be the most expensive RV you have ever rented because I will not sleep in it. You're going to have to get hotel rooms for us as well. I got to tell you, it was an amazing trip. We had so much fun, and I did sleep in the RV, and it was just fine. Although you cannot bring an RV into a city like Chicago without, well, first navigating crazy traffic, but also finding an incredibly expensive place to park it. I don't remember all the details, but I do remember him saying we're not going to be able to just park and sleep in the RV in Chicago. And forgive me, I'll wrap up the story in a minute. But Slade has a friend who operates a funeral home in Skokie outside of Chicago. So we parked the RV there and we Ubered into the city. And we had a great time. The team, if you remember this, any Syracuse people out there, they were not favorited to win the first game, let alone to continue, but they surprised everybody and kept winning. We followed the Syracuse University Sour Citrus Band around Chicago. We did a lot of fun things as well. It was an amazing trip. And on the way back out of town, my husband's friend was like, oh, we just had a funeral. Would you like some food? And one of the weirdest experiences of my life, he insisted on giving us bagels and all this food. But yes, we did 6 states in 5 days in the RV. We did another RV trip, very quick one, when we brought my daughter back to college in the fall of 2020. She went to Tulane and they kept the school open beginning fall of 2020, and they did an amazing job. But of course, like everybody, we hadn't really gone anyplace. So we decided to make that kind of a last gasp summer vacation. And we drove from Charlotte to New Orleans in the RV, which was also a lot of fun. And Slade and I are talking about sometime in the future doing a long-term golf trip, like maybe a 3-month golf trip where we just go around and play golf and live in the RV. That's a long way away. I don't know. I can't really imagine doing that, but it sounds like fun. Especially if we keep doing the golf podcast we started last year. It's called Sticks Together, and we're still feeling our way around it, but we're having a really good time. So I could see kind of combining those 2. But my guest this week is here to answer all of those questions, and specifically to talk about living in an RV with type 1 diabetes. Chris Stocker is a blogger from way back. Many of you will remember that name. He wrote Life of a Diabetic, and that website is still up. I will link it up. But Chris and Amanda are a full-time RV travel family of 4. They are Type 1 Detour. They have a blog and they have videos. They have been living in, and I'm reading here, a 2022 Grand Design Solitude since July of 2021. Chris and Amanda have 2 girls. As I said, their older daughter lives with Type 1, as does Chris. I've followed their journey for a long time, and I have a lot of questions. Our conversation right after this. For many of you, as you listen, this is going to sound like a weird question. Why do you use the insulin pump you've got on right now? There's a really good chance that you went on that pump 15 or 20 years ago because it's what your doctor had back then, and you've never really thought about changing. That was us until Benny's Pump Company went out of business. And I was amazed how much things had changed when we looked for a new one. I'm telling you, it is time to take advantage of what's new. If you need a sign to switch, this is it. Omnipod 5. The tubeless automated insulin delivery system is here, and it's available through the pharmacy, which means that you can try it today, even if your tubed pump is under warranty. Fill out the quick online form, see if you're eligible for a free trial. Go to diabetes-connections.com, click on the Omnipod logo. For full safety risk information and free trial terms and conditions, visit omnipod.com/diabetesconnections. Chris and Amanda, welcome. I'm glad to talk to you. I'm glad to catch up with you guys. How are you doing today?
Good. Excellent. Thank you for having us. We're happy to be here.
All right, let's start with asking, where are you? Give me an update on your travel. Amanda, let me ask you that.
Yes, we are currently in Florida. That's typically what we do in the wintertime because we're kind of limited, obviously, on states that have warm weather. So right now we're in Florida for basically the winter. And then once we start to warm up and become spring, then we'll head out on our next adventure for 2025.
Okay, before we look ahead, let's get the story. Chris, tell me what happened. How did you all decide to do this full time?
It was actually, so this was during 2020 when a lot of stuff was going on during that time. And we were living in Pennsylvania at the time. Amanda is born and raised in South Florida. And we couldn't fly anywhere. We didn't want to stay in hotels and we wanted to see her family. And I just was like, oh, why don't we rent an RV and we'll just take it to Florida, and looked that up. Found out renting an RV was pretty expensive. So I was like, okay, well, let me figure this out. Literally one night I couldn't sleep. And at about 2-3 o'clock in the morning, I was on YouTube and I saw that there were people that were crazy enough to be living full time in an RV with their kids. And I was like, that can't be a real thing. I watched a bunch of videos, couldn't sleep that night. Like as soon as she woke up in the morning, I was like, hey, listen, I have a crazy idea, but before you say no, just hear me out. And I was like, let's just buy an RV and travel the country full time. And shockingly, she was like, okay, let's do it. Let's figure out how to do it, but I'm down. Let's do it. So that was how it started. That was like summer of 2020, maybe. And then took us almost a full year to launch,
Right.
if you will.
Prepare everything. We had to, list the house. We had to sell our current vehicle. We had to get a bigger vehicle. We had to buy an RV. And of course, then the whole diabetes supplies and how we were going to manage that on the road took a while to really figure out and become comfortable enough
with a plan to be able to do it. And then July 2021, we bought our first truck ever, bought our first RV ever. We had never even been in an RV, and we picked it up actually on our wedding anniversary. That's the day we picked it up. And since then, of July 2021, we've been living and traveling full time in our RV.
All right. I have so many questions, and we're definitely going to talk about diabetes.
Absolutely.
But I understand COVID changed a lot of things for a lot of people. But Amanda, when your husband comes to you and says, I haven't slept all night, I'm excited about this crazy idea. You had at the time, I believe your kids were what, like 4 and 1, 5 and 1? They were little. What went through your head?
Right. Well, our oldest was going to be starting kindergarten. And because it was so crazy at that time, we decided to start her virtually because that's basically how things were anyway. So I'm like, okay, we got at least that under control here. He was working remote. So I'm like, okay, we got that figured out. Our little one's just a little one, so not much to figure out there. And I was already a stay-at-home mom. So I'm like, okay, all right, this isn't as like life-changing in a way, like we're going completely opposite from what our current life is like. So I'm like, all right, okay. I was totally open to the idea. He's always wanted to travel. He's always said like, oh, when we retire, because that's typically what you think of when you are get an RV and travel, retirees. So knew he wanted to do that. And then it was like, all right, well, why not just do it now? Like we got everything pretty much in place. It could work right now for where our life is and how things are going right now. So why not just do it?
And like you said, during COVID, it was really kind of an eye opener to us. Like, hey, I wanted to do this when I retire, but maybe I don't make it to retirement age. Maybe when I retire, I can't walk and go on these hikes that I want to go on. So why not do it when I'm capable of doing it? And that was kind of what just set it
Mhm.
all in motion.
Okay. Again, we got lots to talk about because
Mhm.
you've been doing this since 2021.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
let's talk about diabetes. Chris, you live with type 1. Your daughter has type 1, your older child. Had she been diagnosed when you started the RV stuff?
Yes.
She was diagnosed when she was almost 4, and we were up living in Pennsylvania, and I was 4 or 5 months pregnant
Mm.
with my younger one. So that was a blindside. I mean, we always, had it in the back of our mind, just, because Chris living with type 1 already, I knew what to look for. We knew the symptoms to look for. And so we always had it in the back of our mind. And I was always looking out for those symptoms. But at the same time, I was coming up with excuses for when I did see the symptoms.
Mm.
I was like, "Oh, that's just, yeah, her going from a 3-year-old, 4-year-old. She's just growing, she's growing, she has a growth spurt." And, so I kind of always, like, came up with reasonings for with what those symptoms were, and then then a couple months later, I was like, "Yeah, I don't know, something's not right." I just got over being sick from a virus. So I was like, okay, maybe now she's catching it because she just seemed off, whatever. And then that's when, we checked her, and sure enough, it was.
Right. She was in the mid 200s when we checked her, so we kind of knew. And she had been starting to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night a lot more frequently too. So that was February of 2019. So yeah, about a little over 2 years she was diagnosed. So we kind of had a routine. We had some things worked out with being on a pump and a CGM and stuff like that, and we kind of had a flow of knowing what to do, but also knew at the same time it was going to be a lot different being on the road as opposed to just being 10 minutes from a hospital at all times.
Mhm.
So there were definitely some things to
Yeah, a lot of
consider.
concerns. But then once I started, really digging into it, I was realizing like, okay, it's not so like I'm not going to be stranded in the middle of nowhere in the mountains if I don't want to. I can stay close by to a hospital. There's campgrounds plenty around a hospital, around a grocery store. That was another one of my concerns was what if we run out of candy or juice, supplies we need for a low blood sugar. So it was a lot of fear and concern that I wasn't going to be able to find like the supplies and the resources, we needed day to day, traveling just through different states and random cities we know nothing about. But then once I started to, dig into it, I was like, okay, this is like, it's okay. It will be okay. It will look a little different. We'll have to jump some extra hoops, but we can totally make it work.
Well, I mean, my first question isn't even about hospitals and things like that, because I know that's a concern, but I'm like, God, what a pain in the ass to just order all the supplies you need. So how do you do that? Because listen, everybody's insurance is different. Everybody's process is different. We have terrible insurance and we can't even order supplies out of state. Like I can't send them to the CVS in Virginia where my kid goes to college. I have to get them here in North Carolina and then ship them. So in my head, I'm thinking, how are you guys doing this? So if you wouldn't mind, like take me out, and you got 2 people. How are you getting all your
Absolutely,
supplies?
yeah. Absolutely. And that was probably our biggest concern. And
Yeah.
that was where when we first decided to do this, so at the time I was working as a realtor. I knew that I couldn't take that job on the road, right? I couldn't sell houses in Pennsylvania and be in Arizona and make it work. So I transitioned from being on the realtor side to the mortgage side of things. And I got a job with a national mortgage company so I could have insurance that was cover me across the country. That's how I first started. So that way was very easy. But now our oldest daughter in the state of Pennsylvania, which we are still residents of the state of Pennsylvania, they cover any person with diabetes under the age of 18 at 100% coverage. You have zero out of pocket expenses for doctor's appointments, supplies, insulin, CGMs. You don't pay a penny. However, everything has to be done in the state of Pennsylvania. So my parents still live in Pennsylvania. So for her, they pick up all of her supplies from the local CVS. They pick up all her test strips, pump supplies, and then they will gather everything and ship to us wherever we are going to be at. During this process, I had left the mortgage company and went back to being an entrepreneur and running my own marketing business again. So I had to fall back onto state provided insurance, which is the same thing. I can only get things in state. So my parents have become best friends with the local pharmacist at the CVS. But previously, what we were doing was whatever area we were in, we would go to that CVS and say, hey, can you just transfer this prescription here? Our recommendation to people is to find a national pharmacy. Amanda just so happened to choose CVS because they're always in Targets, and it gives her a reason to want to go pick up the prescription. So even though the prescriptions are free, they don't tend to end up being free once you get, inside the Target, but that's another story.
In there.
Yeah. So that's how we kind of, and then certain things can be our mail order. So I am currently now, I use Medtronic. So my infusion sets and sensors and everything, they come through a supply company, and that's mail order. So whatever campground I'm going to be at, I kind of have to plan ahead. So when we know when it's reorder time, we will try to stay at a campground for maybe a little bit longer just to make sure there's no issues with shipping delays or anything like that. But there does take some logistics and planning,
Right.
but it's really not that difficult. We know where we're going to be, and we will have things shipped there to the campground or to a local post office that I can just go pick it up. So it's actually that has probably been the easiest part of doing this when we thought it was going to be the most difficult part to do it. But yeah, so my parents will usually send out like a monthly box. And as a grandmother, my mom loves to add some things in there that I say our children don't need these things. We live in an RV. We don't need all these little tiny things anymore. But that box still comes with them. So it gives her the opportunity to, send cards and little gifts and stuff that she likes to do. So, but yeah, that's definitely been the easiest part is either national pharmacies or have a relative that can pick things up.
So that was surprising. That was easier. What
Mhm.
was surprising in a not so easy way? Like what's hard? What's not great? Right back to our conversation. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dexcom. I'm so excited that the Dexcom G7 is here. I know you probably have a lot of questions about insurance. You're not alone. Dexcom understands how complicated this can seem, and they've made it as simple as possible. Dexcom is the #1 covered CGM brand. You can visit the Dexcom Savings Center for a free benefits check to see what coverage options are available to you. Powerful and simple, Dexcom G7 is proven to lower A1C and help you spend more time in range. Learn more, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo.
I would say probably, even though we've now, after 3.5 years, have been able to figure it out, but I would say the grocery shopping and trying to stay somewhat eating healthy. So when you
Mm.
travel all across the country, the first thing I want to do is I want to try the local food, right? Like if I'm in a certain area, I want to know like, okay, you're known for a certain type of food. I want to try that food. We went to Texas. I wanted all, the biggest, baddest steaks around and just give me all the brisket you can find. you're also tempted by going to the local, donut shops or pizza place and just try things around the country. So when we first started, it was kind of like, yeah, let's do everything. Let's try everything. And then it's like, okay, well, now our blood sugars are just like way out of whack. We're all over the place. We're one day we're hiking, the next day we're not. We're just sitting in the RV. So I would say that was probably the most difficult part from a diabetes standpoint, was just trying to just like figure out like, hey, this isn't just a full blown vacation where you're just, you're going on this food, like this world food tour or something. You still have to like kind of have some structure in place. And, so we figured out that we do a lot of our grocery shopping through Walmart, just because Amanda can just use the app. I can just go pick it up. They have the same products at every store across the country. So we can stick to our, our normal, these are our core, things that,
Staple, yeah.
right, that we have in our house at all times. I would say that was probably the most difficult, but we figured out a plan of how to kind of work through that. But initially I will say that I think my A1C was probably a lot higher those first like 3 to 6 months of being on the road, because it was just like a free for all. And it just, we realized very quickly that we couldn't sustain like doing that.
Yeah. Amanda, same thing, or you have a different opinion?
Yeah, definitely. We can't treat it like a vacation. Some people out there might think like, oh, wow, they're traveling every day. They're on like a yearly vacation. No, no, we try to have the same routine. We do the same things as you would do in a house. We're just in an RV and we have our day-to-day routine and how we do things. And yes, it's definitely not a vacation every
What
day.
about doctor's appointments? How do you guys do that? Because everybody's got to go. I mean, and for diabetes, definitely you need to check in at least
Right.
probably once a year.
I think I may actually now change my answer, because maybe doctor's appointments is the most difficult. Now that now
That's
that
up
I'm thinking
there.
about it, yeah.
Yeah.
So, because we all know that in order for our supplies to be covered, the insurance companies need certain type of documentation, and for us, that is a maximum 6-month in-person doctor's notes. So that means at a bare minimum, every 6 months, we have to be seen in person. They prefer every 90 days, but that's not happening. So every 6 months, basically, we have to be back in Pennsylvania. So we plan our routes accordingly. For example, last year we were in Mount Rushmore. We were in South Dakota, and we knew that we needed to be back for annual pediatric, just regular doctor's appointments, our daughter's endo, my endo,
Dentists, all
dentist,
the
Right.
everything
routine.
like.
Mhm.
So we were going to fly, and then we realized like it's actually cheaper for us to just drive our RV, with the price of what the airlines were in that area. So we basically just drove from South Dakota to Pennsylvania in like 4 or 5 days. We spent a month there to visit friends and family, get all of our doctor's appointments out of the way, and then we hit the road again. Then earlier this year, we were in Florida. We wanted to see the eclipse. We drove from Florida to Ohio to be right in the path of totality. And then from Ohio, then we went over to Pennsylvania. And then we every 6 months kind of plan our route accordingly.
Mhm.
2025, we do have a plan to be in the Pacific Northwest pretty much all year.
Wow.
So we're not making that trip. So we will be flying during that one, but we have not flown yet to go back for doctor's appointments. But that is what the plan will be this year. But typically we just kind of plan our routes, and we schedule, things we want to see, and then we'll spend maybe, a few weeks in Pennsylvania while
Yeah.
we're in that area
And it's
to
also a
explore.
good yeah, and it's also a good way to go back home and, visit his parents and family and stuff like that. Yeah, it's kind of like a 2 for 1. Yeah.
Hmm.
We do all of our logistic stuff back in Pennsylvania, and then we hit
Yeah.
the road again.
And then kind of in between those, we are sometimes able to do virtual appointments. Depending on where we're located in the country, we may not be able to technically do virtual appointments because it's based on where I'm logging in on my phone at, which is a whole nother issue. But sometimes we are able to do virtual appointments and whatnot. And we knock on wood, if we need to, go to a CVS clinic or something like that, just for something random, we can do that. But yeah, for doctor's appointments, we do have to plan. That's probably where our most biggest planning happened because we do take our home on wheels with us, but it hasn't really been an issue yet. We've been able to line it up to be part of our path.
Are your kids homeschooled? Is that how you do school?
Yeah, they do a cyber school through the state. And so they have like live teachers and classmates, and they can log on to Zoom and do the lesson with right there with the teacher, or we can choose to do it on our own time, which is great. We love the flexibility of that because with this lifestyle, not every day is going to look the same. So one day, we might be in a national park area, so we want to go for a hike or explore that for the day. We can take the day off of school and do that, and it's not going to be a problem. We'll just do the lesson on our own time. So yeah, we really love that, and our girls are really good on the computer with the technology thing. So that really helps, and yeah, they love it. And I like that it's a good mix of like the traditional homeschool along with like the traditional brick and mortar
Public school,
school,
right.
public school, right?
Yeah.
So it has a little bit of both.
So like our oldest, she started that in kindergarten. She's now in fourth grade. She's had some of the same classmates, since kindergarten. So she's been able to create relationships with kids and other students. And it's through the state of Pennsylvania. And I think they kind of group them like the eastern part of Pennsylvania and the western part. So when we go back, we're able to do meetups with, some of her students. And Amanda used to be a early elementary teacher before having kids, and she could not homeschool her own kids. So we're thankful that Pennsylvania has this cyber school program to where they have actual teachers there's a curriculum, and then we just add in what we feel is needed, where they might, need additional help or support, or try to teach them about the local cultures and whatever area that we're in at that time.
Right.
So, talk to me a little bit about the actual living space and the storage space, because I have a regular house and diabetes supplies seem to take over sometimes. And I'm
Mhm.
curious, with two people and all the
Mhm.
supplies you have and all the other stuff that goes in a home, paint a picture for me. What's this look like?
Yeah. We have a master bedroom that has underneath the queen bed has a whole storage area. So that's where we keep both of their diabetes supplies, and has a full closet for some extra like day to day that we take out to do like changes or things like that. And we have a full kitchen that has a residential fridge. So just like your fridge in your house, we have it in here, which was kind of like a necessity when we were looking for an RV because of the importance of the insulin. We wanted to make sure that would always stay cold in the fridge and nothing that wouldn't be touched or interrupted. And then we have a living space, a dining space, and then the second bedroom is the kids' room. So they have their own bunk beds and their own bathroom back there. And we have the storage under the bed has really come in handy because that's where we keep all the supplies. And we have learned getting on the road that we need to stock up on the supplies. So we have a good amount of stuff under there that keeps us months ahead.
Yeah.
And then juices obviously go in the fridge, and have in the pantry we even have, and that's where extra juices and candy and low blood
Right.
sugar
Yeah.
food is.
It doesn't always stay organized,
Mhm.
but we have an area where it goes. Doesn't As long as it's in that area, it's good. But we had to downsize a ton, so I mean, we had to get rid of a lot of stuff, and we spent a
Yeah.
few months having random people show up at our front door from Facebook Marketplace. Risking my life for a $5, piece of furniture, whatever. But that was something that we definitely had to do. And this lifestyle kind of teaches you very quickly that the material things are not as like valuable to us as they once were. I'm a huge sports fan. I loved having, 65, 70-inch TV with the surround sound, being able to watch my football. And I have a much smaller TV, but I'm closer to it, so it looks bigger, and it's there's just a lot of things like sports memorabilia, like things that you just downsize from. But
Right.
the
We've learned definitely kind of the minimalistic lifestyle because you have no choice but to.
You've done this now for a little over 3 years.
Mhm.
Are you going to keep going? Any thoughts long term here? Is this it? Are the girls going to be in high school in the RV? Any thoughts in the
So
future?
so
Yeah.
we like literally 3 days ago, we had plans and we changed them. So we don't know what we're doing. A lot of people do kinda come into this lifestyle saying like, "Hey, we're gonna do this for a year, or we're gonna do this for 2 years, and that's what we're gonna do." I don't personally like putting, because then I'm, like, counting down to it. So I don't like saying like, "Okay, by the end of 2025, we're done," because then I'm like, "Oh, well, I'm almost done. I didn't get to see what I wanted to." So we're just gonna keep doing it until it doesn't make sense. So for us, it makes sense right now.
And it has
Right.
made sense the past 3.5 years.
Right.
And
So it could be a year, could be 2 years, could be 3 years, and we have open conversations with our girls. They love this. They absolutely love doing this. We will come across that when the time comes, and I think we'll know. I think we'll both just kinda know when that time is, but we do there's so much to see in this country. I've never been to majority of these states.
right.
This quick example, my favorite state now is the state of Utah. If you would have told me that like 5 years ago, I would have told you that you're absolutely crazy. But we spent, like almost 2 months in Utah, and it was like there's snow, there's mountains, there's valleys, there's canyons, there's so many different
Desert.
landscapes there. It's
Yeah,
like
it's like
there's so much to see in this country that I just feel like until I'm able to see it all and
right.
show it to our girls, like maybe they want to live in one of these places. Something that's had a lasting effect on us was the very first national park we went to with our RV was Acadia National Park up in Maine. It blew us away. Our daughter, our oldest daughter, so that was 2.5 years ago at this point, still to this day, it's not only her favorite national park, she is like determined to become a park ranger in that park. So like everything, like when we're doing school, we're doing things like that's what her focus is, and it's had like a last like when if we were just living in our house, like she probably would have never been exposed to that as a job, as a career, as an interest, or anything like that. So something like that has had a lasting impact on us. Like maybe one's going to want to live in the Pacific Northwest. Maybe one enjoys, the coastal towns in South Carolina or something like that. So we want to kind of
Yeah,
just
just
explore and
showing
see
our
and
yeah,
yeah,
and for ourselves as well.
right.
We've never been Chris grew up, born and raised Pennsylvania. I don't think ever left Pennsylvania
Not
until
often.
you met me in college and down in Florida.
Right. Yeah.
So
I'd never been on a plane till I was 20 years old. So,
Mhm.
I lived under that small little rock. I didn't know that the rest of the world existed. I just knew my small town vibes and that was it. And it's just and again, we want to do this with our children because we want to experience it with them. I recently had just posted about this and we had seen like this quote and it really hit home where it's said that you will spend majority of your life knowing your kids as adults. So why not spend as much time with them while they're children as possible? And it really hits home to us because like that's what we want to do. We want to enjoy this time with them. And sometimes people are like, "Oh, well, your kids are never going to even remember this," which is fine. Maybe they won't, but they will. We get those memories of seeing their reaction as seeing a 3-year-old seeing the Grand Canyon for the first time. That's a different reaction you're going to get than when they're 17 and don't have a care in the world other than what their friend is doing on TikTok. You get different reactions from our children and make different types of memories and stuff like that. So, is there an end in sight? We truly one of the reasons why we did this because you don't know what we didn't know what the future tomorrow is going to bring. So,
Mhm.
if it, yeah, we'll just keep
Yeah,
going until we're not
and
anymore.
we've only hit 26 or 7
Yes,
states.
we've gone
So
kind of
we
slow.
got a lot more to go.
Before I let you go, Chris, you lived with type 1 since you were a young adult. Your daughter diagnosed much younger. How is she doing? How are you doing?
So Amanda pretty much is her
Her
100%.
pancreas,
Yeah,
yeah.
she is kind of like I even I if I'm in charge of like bolusing like for breakfast and stuff, like I'm like Amanda, I don't what do I do here? Like I know how to do my own, but I think she's thriving. She's doing amazing. She's an educator at heart. Being
Anybody, yeah, that, she meets and they right away ask, "Oh, what is that on your arm?" or whatever. She's confident and proud of her diabetes. She is like, "Oh, that," and explains the whole thing. "Oh, that's a Dexcom, it's a CGM, and it tests my blood sugar every 5 minutes," and she can give you the whole breakdown.
yeah,
And yeah, a whole educational lesson, and she just has like a positive outlook on it. I don't know if that's her personality in general or because she was only 3 turning 4 when she was diagnosed, so maybe that's all
It's
she
kind of
really
all she knows,
knows.
right?
But she has never been like, why me? Why do I have this? Why I just want to, go back to where I used to be, where I didn't have to take shots or whatever. She has never been like that. She always has a positive outlook. And I think that has helped us
Yeah, for
in
sure.
like definitely have like a positive mindset on this disease. And I know it's not easy, but we just take it minute by minute, literally day by day.
One
And
bolus at a time and
yeah,
one correction at a time. And
I'm going to ask, and I mean this with no judgment because every family does this differently. I'm surprised, and I know as you listen, some people are going to be surprised too, that Chris, you're like, I don't know how to bolus her. Like you
Mhm.
live with type 1. Amanda, you do not. So
Yep,
can I delve a little deeper? Like, what's that all
absolutely.
about, Chris?
Obviously, I know how to use her Omnipod and give her things, but Amanda is so involved into the day to day where like Amanda knows like, okay, if I'm giving her oatmeal, like I may have to give her like an extra incremental bolus or something like that.
I
Whereas
know
me, I don't
how
do that. Right.
certain foods react to her body.
Right.
Then also at the same time, like after breakfast, I'm going to take them to the playground. So I know, okay, well, I'm probably not going to bolus as much, or, I have to take this in consideration because as soon as she's done eating, she's going to go out and play. And I know what her body does when she starts being active and playing. Whereas it's not that he doesn't know that
Right.
stuff. He just it doesn't know my mind. And I know what, day to day is going to look like for us since I'm with her 24/7. So, yeah, then that's where we've kind of taken like the approach, like we've kind of worked it out where like I'm basically in charge of her and he's in charge of him. I don't want to put any more on his plate. But there are certain situations, yeah, when I have to go out to do something. I run to the grocery store or I go here, go there, go on a walk or something like that. And he's in charge and that's totally okay.
There are those, little things where it's like, okay, do I put her in activity mode like now or in 30 minutes or certain things like that. So I may not be as spot on. Like I know if she's eating 30 carbs, I'm putting that into her pump and I'm setting a 15-20 minute timer. I get most of it, but like Amanda said, there's certain things where like she knows a little bit more detail. And I'm starting to go into helping her a little bit more because so when my daughter was diagnosed, at that time I was on a Medtronic pump and I knew we were going to be putting my daughter onto an Omnipod and Dexcom immediately. I wanted her to feel as comfortable as possible. So I actually left Medtronic and went over to Omnipod and started wearing an Omnipod and Dexcom so she could see me wearing it. I could learn the system. I could know how to troubleshoot everything, whatever. Well, over the last, 4 years, my management was not the best. And I had to talk with my doctor, like, what can we do differently? He just said, why don't you just give Medtronic another chance with their 780G and just give it a go. I tried it within a couple months.
Yeah.
My life completely changed. I had the lowest A1C I've ever had. And I'm now kind of on like a cruise control because now that pump is just managing my diabetes. I don't want to say for me, but basically it is doing a lot more for me. I'm not constantly thinking about like what my sugar is. It's doing its thing and it's in the background now. And I now have the brain capacity to kind of help out with her diabetes too, because I don't have to worry so much about my own anymore. Mine's just put in my carbs that I'm eating. If I overeat, who cares? It's going to figure it out and fix it for me. So, I'm able to kind of help out a little bit more and be able to do that. But Amanda's with the girls so like basically almost all day, every day,
24/7.
24/7. So as while I'm working and doing things like she's at the playground with them, she's taking them places and stuff. So
Right.
she's definitely became and credit to her because like she doesn't as as a parent, you don't really get the credit.
Before I let you go, let me just wrap this up by asking, what would you say to people who have a kid with type 1, live with type 1 themselves that are thinking about this kind of move? Any advice or any questions they should be asking themselves?
I would say do it. Definitely have a plan. I don't want to say like, don't think about it, just go out and do it. You got to have a plan in place. So even if it's not going and traveling full time and living in an RV, even if it's, you want to go on a summer trip for 3 months or something like that, obviously this is very similar to that. Just have a plan in place, like talk to your doctors, tell them what you're going to be doing. Don't try to hide it. And then something comes up and you have to have a virtual visit or something like that. But definitely don't get discouraged by the diabetes. Like there's a way to figure it out. You will figure it out. You will be able to get your supplies. You might have to ask questions and like I said, have a plan in place. And also not all RVing is in the middle of nowhere. Like we kind of thought maybe that was going to be. So we had like a rule where like we have to stay within 20 minutes, 25 minutes of a hospital or a pharmacy or something like that. And we've been able to find campgrounds that are, every so often we might have a couple nights where we're a little further out in the desert or something like that, but we're not
We just
spending
plan
weeks.
ahead.
Right. We plan ahead.
Plan ahead for that. And if you want to do something, you want to travel, you want to go here, you want to go there, do it. Diabetes shouldn't hold you back from living your life to the fullest that you want to live. And it's honestly not living in an RV or a camper or, on the road is honest not that much different than living in a house.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of my biggest fears before starting this was like, how is this? I was trying to paint a picture. How is this life going to look? I just couldn't wrap my head around it. But everything else we planned out. And then it was like, we just got to go. We just got to take the step and do it and figure it out as we go.
The diabetes shouldn't be the part that's holding you back. It's more, could I do this whether I had diabetes or if I didn't? And a lot of times people will say no. Our mentality is we wanted to try this. If it failed, we literally could just go right back and we could buy a house and go back to that lifestyle and do that all over again. But if we didn't, we would live the rest of our life saying, what if we didn't do that? Like, what if we did
And
this?
regret,
So,
right?
right.
Yeah.
So that's why that's kind of where our social media handle came from. I had been in the diabetes social space for over a decade as the life of a diabetic, and we came up with Type 1 Detour because we want, our tagline is create your own detour, and that's what we want people to do is just like, don't think you have to, follow this path because whether you have diabetes, a chronic illness, whatever it is, like you can create your own detour. You can figure out how to make this work and live your life instead of living the life somebody else has planned for you or what they want you to do. And diabetes is just it's another detour that you just have to take, and you work around it. You go around the traffic cones and you figure out how to get back on your path, and that's it. And you make it work. If you want it to work, you can make it work.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your time. I'm excited to learn more, and we'll link up all of your stuff. But Chris and Amanda, thanks for spending so much time with me.
Thanks
Absolutely.
for
Thank you for having us.
We enjoyed it.
I'm going to link up more information about Type 1 Detour. You can just go to diabetes-connections.com and click on this episode's homepage or check out the show notes wherever you were listening. It was really fun to catch up with Chris and to talk to Amanda. But Chris and I knew each other from the blogosphere way back when. I started blogging about diabetes in January of 2007, just a couple of weeks after Benny was diagnosed. I started my blog because I had radio listeners who knew nothing about diabetes and they wanted to learn more. And gradually, it really turned into this podcast. It's been fun to see where a lot of the folks who were so heavily involved in blogging have ended up, and it's always fantastic to reconnect. So thanks, Chris, and thanks, Amanda, for coming on. If you haven't already, please sign up for our newsletter. I send it out once a week, sometimes a little bit more than that when I've got something important on my mind. Don't send you any spam. I really don't try to junk up your inbox with lots and lots of emails, but it's a great way to stay posted on what's going on with the show. I've been kind of trying to write a little bit more this year. I started sharing the newsletter on LinkedIn and got some really good feedback from there. So trying to share more information in each one. It's also a great place to stay up to date on paid studies and other good info from around the diabetes community that I think is good to share, that I would like to know about, and I think you would like to know about as well. I will put a link in the show notes, and you can always go to the website, diabetes-connections.com, scroll all the way down. I mean, all the way down. And you will see a link for the newsletter there. I mean, I know a lot of you are on social media, but hey, listen, I'll be honest with you. You never know when they're going to pull the plug on social or when Facebook is going to boot us off or something weird's going to happen. So I would love it. I think that's the best way for us to stay in touch. So take a couple minutes, sign up for that. I'd really appreciate it. Thanks to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Stacey Sims. I'll see you back here soon. Until then, be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.